Soft green light speckled the translucent skin of Blue's ears and cheeks as he walked beneath the shade of the canopy. His measured footsteps fell muffled on the blanketed forest floor. All around him, the air was buzzing with life. The rich smells and sounds flooded his senses, cocooning him in the emerald world of dappled sunlight and leisured time. Sweat trickled down his back as the sun warmed him with the passing of the day. By noon, he'd reached a fork in the path. Blue watched as a chipmunk scurried past another sign that read Crete, which pointed towards the path on his right. To his left, the path wove deeper into the forest towards the mountains. Blue noticed that there was no sign for the path on the left. He stood for a moment, hypnotized by the trail that narrowed like a dark artery into the forest's womb. Blue's senses twisted, and he saw a red, felt a craving, a desire for the forest's secrets. He wanted to know what was inside. Crete first, he thought, turning to his right. He'd found a gnarled walking stick that he used to tap against the stones as he walked. Blue continued on his way, strolling by chestnut trees and weeping willows. He began thinking of all the food he'd find as his stomach rumbled away. The hungry man trudged between the tree trunks and through the bushes. Over the rocks and streams he climbed on his way to something new. Colorful birds with bright, feathered chests zipped by overhead, making chirping sounds. Forest deer stood statuesque, like guardians in the distant sunbeams, their jaws bobbing up and down with cud. Their eyes watched knowingly, innocent and black. Blue wondered if it was the emptiness in their eyes that inspired their innocence, or if it was the emptiness in him. He watched as a wild buck cut through the sunlit valley below him, 20 feet ahead. It stood majestic and tall, its hooves firmly planted into the green earth, its antlers gleaming with fresh blood. The buck looked at Blue, its nostrils flaring before decidedly turning and leaping away. Blue stood admiring the beast's presence before continuing down the path. It was late afternoon by the time he reached the first of the ruins. The sky was cradling the sun, retiring its blue and white streaks for pink and gold ones. The fine muscles around Blue's eyes relaxed as he breathed out, gazing at the concrete graveyard ahead. Grass around his feet disappeared as he approached and was replaced by dirt and broken glass. The ruins loomed around him like some haunted stone playground. Glassless windows and doors yawned open, exposing the dilapidated and musty interiors. Stony buttresses arched overhead, connecting structures and gates. A stony gargoyle with a broken wing sat atop a light post which had succumbed to ivy. The demon's demeanor darkened under the shadows of the canopy as Blue passed by underneath. It seemed to scowl at him, vicious horns protruding from its head. The whispers of wars, legacies, and dreams permeated through the leafy folds of a forgotten past, calling to Blue. He could feel the forest's power and size, its interconnected roots like muscles speaking through buried synaptic channels. The trunks rising up like the haired back of some underground beast, waiting to arch its back and spine, splitting the earth. Blue weaved between the empty buildings and trees, searching for any signs of food or people. After half an hour of walking, he realized that he was still very much alone. These buildings have long been abandoned, he thought, brushing aside a large cobweb in what used to be a doorway. He stepped inside, curious for what he'd find. A sign against the wall, spotted with mold, read, "Coffee." Blue proceeded through the entryway and past the dusty countertops to explore. There were wobbling tables and grimy wooden chairs scattered about the dreary space. Endless plastic containers lined the dirty floors and shelves. Blue sniffed the air. The faint smell of something sweet wafted by from time to time. As he walked, his feet crunched over spilled coffee beans mixed with animal droppings. Blue sat carefully on one of the dusty chairs, worried that it might disintegrate beneath him. The only sound in the dark room and the surrounding forest was a small echo that clipped along as Blue wrapped his fingertips against the oak shelves on the walls, pillowed with mushrooms. The last of the sunlight streamed in through the punctured ceilings, bathing him. Vines twisted around plastic cooking machines and metal sinks. In a corner, the name Amber was scribbled across a dusty plastic cup that now housed a mouse. When the chair beneath him had had enough, it cracked under his weight, sending him falling to the floor. He stood back up, dusting off, as he watched a flock of birds swirl up this way and then that way, together and away from the freshly rustled trees. Blue stared out at them, rubbing his backside and listening to the echoes. He noticed his sweaty palms that shook slightly. Clenching them, he backed away from the rotting shelves and out through the crumbling walls. No one knew what lay beneath the windows and concrete frames that Blue now carefully climbed over. He maneuvered over ledges and sections of concrete that had collapsed in on itself, leaving craters of rubble. Each window whispered an unknown story, beckoning him into the swallowing darkness. A chunky black telephone with missing buttons, an empty trash bin next to a file cabinet missing a drawer. Blue wandered through the silent rooms, disappearing and reappearing between the branches and leaves that choked the halls. Sometimes there were ceilings, other times he could see the rising moon through the splintered roofs that used to be. It was getting darker now, and with the canopy often concealing the light of the moon, Blue barely managed to see the forest floor in front of him. His legs were beginning to ache from the journey, and he'd lost track of time. The desolate buildings seemed to go on forever. He ventured through the ruins until finally he saw tendrils of smoke in the sky and traced them down to a flame about 600 yards away in the shallow valley below. It was dark now, and the yellow flame danced brightly against the muted grays and browns of the ghetto he'd entered. It was dangerous on the outskirts of the city, in the slums. Every sort of thief, vagabond, and scoundrel made their way to the edges and lingered there, festering with nowhere else to run. Like bees, clinging to the fragile skins of their hive, thrumming and pulsing, yellow jackets concealing stingers. The forest itself was no safer. No one went into the woods because no one knew what was in them. Blue found himself surfacing from the forest just as night came. Its dark secrets would have to remain a mystery for now. He knew that strange things happened in the night. He'd heard eerie and inexplicable sounds coming from the woods while he slept alone in the lighthouse. He'd been grateful for the walls that surrounded him that night, and now he was grateful for the friendly flame that beckoned to him in the distance.